So, good morning everybody. Welcome to Vienna. We're glad to be able to host you here in Vienna. I thought if there are no other topics or questions, maybe I'll give you before my colleague comes to talk about quality of the supply and security of supply. I can talk maybe a little bit almost off the records about how regulatory agency was established in Austria, so some of the experiences of the first few years, which I think in some way will be also relevant to you, because I'm sure you have had some similar experience and probably you will also face similar challenges that we had over the first couple of years. I think you already have received, probably, or many of you have seen some presentations about e-control, so I will not bother you with more of that. But maybe just share some experience of the first couple of years. Now, Austria has a relatively complicated electricity sector with 140 companies, rebalancing zones, quite a bit of integration with the German market, and we also have a large share of public ownership in the utilities in Austria. Of course, we had many years of regulatory setting of end-user prices or total prices that you have, but this was done by the ministry or by a group of stakeholders organized by the ministry and then finally by the minister after this committee approved the electricity prices were. And then when the first energy liberalization package of the European Union was implemented, of course we went farther than many other countries and we removed any price control from the commodity part, from electricity, and we implemented only price control for the network part, not for the commodity part. And of course the European Union legislation also required the setting up of a regulatory agency or regulatory institution. And we were set up according to the same model that was used in the telecom sector. So there's a telecom regulator in Austria which is very similarly organized as a private limited liability company which is owned by the government and also the commission and the management separated and so on. So basically the telecom model was taken and implemented in electricity. But of course for the industry and for the other stakeholders, this institution as a regulator was very new and very unusual for the Austrian legal system. So there was also a lot of uncertainty and I would say unawareness how it would really work in practice, because it had never been that an institution like that was involved in the energy sector before. And of course, since the government or the regional governments own large shares in the energy companies, there was from the first day on a lot of political interest in what we did, because the lower prices went, the less money the governments made through their shareholdings in their companies. So the governments had a very keen interest in what happened here. At that time, the EU legislation only required that the regulatory authority was independent from the energy industry, but it did not require at that time that it was independent from government intervention. Of course, now the third package also requires that the regulatory authority cannot receive any instructions from government, so it has to be also independent from government, which was not the case then. And what we decided is that the way or the best way to become independent in our action was on the one side that we had a very high level of professionalism and technical knowledge in all relevant areas, that we needed enough resources to fulfill the obligations we had and to do what was necessary to do, and focus on the right type of activities, on the important ones. And finally, that we needed to develop our own identity, our own corporate vision for staff, but also for the outside world, so that we are perceived as an independent, separate agency which is not part of the state directly, but has its own opinion, its own view, its own approach, how to deal with the problems and challenges. And Since then, we have tried to develop our own channels of communication with all stakeholders, with the media, with companies, also with politics, of course, because political institutions are important in the context of energy, but they should not be enjoying any preferential relation with the regulator. They should be as important as other stakeholder groups in the communication process. And of course, in the third energy package, this independence, this separate identity for the regulator is now a legal requirement on a new level. So it reinforces what we have done and it strengthens what we have done. But I think it's also sort of a lesson for you how you can achieve a certain degree of independence. And we will try these 3 days, but of course over the next year and a half to share some of the experience we had, some of the things that we were successful, but also some of the things that did not work in control, because we did not win all the battles, but we won more battles than we lost over the years. And in many instances, you learn more from those occasions where you are not successful than from those occasions where you are successful. But I think one of the overriding principles that we have had over the almost 10 years, 9 years now, is that we always tried to be, I would say, between 1 and 2 steps ahead of the energy industry. On our thinking, in our strategy, in anticipating issues and problems. And the second important point is that we, from the very beginning on, developed a very good relationship with the media, with all relevant stakeholders, so that we have our separate communication channels with end consumers, with industry associations, with consumer associations, so that we can get our message across, even though some people in the institutions might be against us or have a different view. So we can still communicate our message properly to everybody who should receive it, and we're not dependent on either politics or other institutions for getting this message to the people who should hear about it. So, this is what I wanted to say as an introduction, but we will be back.